Hey team, hopefully this has popped up for everyone. YouTube's just giving me a couple of funny errors this morning. Can you just give me a shout out in the chat if this is all working? Excellent. I'm having absolutely no luck with YouTube lately. It caused me nothing but grief when I did one last night, and was giving me a couple of weird errors this morning. But looks to be ticking through, which is good. I don't know, this technology stuff. Who'd have it? Cool. So thanks all for joining today. Great to have you all on board once again. This is actually the second one I've done in 24 hours. I threw together a bit of an impromptu one last night for doing the work that I was doing to get the release out the door. So that's all happened now, and the latest release is live. I've still got a couple of little bits and pieces I need to do on that one just to neaten it up. But it's all committed, it's all there, all up on Speedy Loader, so it'll be a good one to go forward with. But that brings us to what happens from here on out. You know, just had a release, and now moving on to the beginning of the next development cycle. And that, you know, to me, it's the most exciting time, because you're not constrained all of a sudden by having a deadline, to having to get things stable. You can it's like Christmas. We can go out and just throw things together. And bring in a bunch of pull requests and start a whole bunch of new features, and I don't need to worry too much for the moment about changing stability for people or anything like that. So it's a really exciting time for me, and it's when a whole bunch of new features start popping up, which is always a bit of fun too. What I'm going to work through today a little bit is just explaining a couple of the things that I want to see go into this new cycle. As well as looking through a couple of the pull requests that came in fairly late in the day in the last development cycle, as there were a couple of really exciting ones that popped up that unfortunately were just realistically too late in the day to make it into the last release cycle. Josh, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. So the absolute first thing that we need to do on any release is, and it's the most boring and mundane thing you can imagine. I'm just going to bring up GitHub here and pull this down. But if anybody caught the stream a little while back, or about 12 hours ago, you would have seen that one of the boring and mundane things I did in that was go through and change all the com signatures to reflect the actual release. So I'm going to go through and do that now, except instead of making them the release version, we go through and make them a new dev version. So this is the version that we created last night, the 2020-08. All I'm going to do is change that over to be 09 now. By convention, I just use the next month. This was from the days when I was doing monthly releases, and the next release would actually be the next month. They're not quite that frequent anymore. They tend to be 2 or 3 months apart now. But by convention, I do just use the next month throughout the development cycle. So we make those 2 changes there. We make the corresponding change in the INI file. And that's all. Basically, that just locks it out, and it indicates to people, or it indicates to Tuner Studio as well as to people, that this is now this is a development release. You're not working on an actual release version at the moment. I also just go through and in the updates file, just set the latest EEPROM flag version or EEPROM data version to the next value. So the updates file here is used for changing and setting any values when people upgrade their firmware. So if you happen to be still stuck on the May 27 firmware and then upload the latest version, the latest released version onto your Speeduino board, it would run through each of these update routines, one for every firmware release, and it would try and do all the data conversions that are needed to bring it up to speed. It's not always 100%, and there have been occasional issues when things have been missed or things don't convert correctly, but that's certainly the intention of how all this works. So I just update that to the new version. We can even go down and we can create a new section down the bottom here. We always just have a different if statement for each one. We can say if the data version equals 15, which was the last one, which was so the 2020-08 release that just went out was version 15. Then we know that we can do any of the updates that we needed. Now we don't have any updates obviously to do at the moment, simply because we haven't made any changes yet, but it's all ready to go once we do. Now I don't actually include this line here until the very late stages of the development cycle, and this is so that anyone who's working on development can continue to get these, just because these will only ever run once for a person. They won't run every time the system is booted up, because we don't want it converting things over and over. And so we comment that one out for now. And that's all we need to do. That's the formal start of a new release cycle, and we just go in and we'll make a commit for that. And we just say September 2020 development signatures. And that just makes it a nice clean cut point that I can see in the commit log for the whole project to say, okay, when did I kick off the new development cycle? When was the last release done, and when does the new one begin? Okay, so that moves us on to, or lets us move on to something a little bit more exciting, and the absolute first one that I wanted to look at, because it was something I was actually going to write, and then all of a sudden a pull request popped up for it, which is amazing. Always fantastic to see something like that. Dave, any plans on adding a PWM table for electric water pump control? Interesting question. No plans for it, but it could certainly be possible. The only difficulty, I guess, is that on the Mega 2560, we are starting to get short of PWM. So a couple of things that we have actually share PWM. So you can share it between Boost or VVT, or we have PWMs allocated for Boost and VVT. If you're not using either of those functions, we're starting to look at reallocating those to different things, and that's this pull request here, which again unfortunately arrived, or unfortunately didn't quite make it in for the last release, but will certainly be looked at for this one. And that allows for PWM, fan functionality as the name suggests, and shares one of the PWMs with one of those other functions. Something very, very similar could certainly be added for electric water pump control, for sure. Yeah, you're currently doing it with VVT, exactly. And that's the only way we can do it. Unfortunately, we're just, in terms of timers and PWM, we are hitting up against the limits on that Mega 2560. Going forward, and with the teensy boards that everybody asks for or asks about, they will free up a few more timers, so we'll have a little bit more flexibility there. But yeah, we do just need to keep in mind the limitations of the hardware with the 2560 is all. Could SPI comms be utilized with a daughter board for this function? Yeah, they certainly could. There's not a lot of SPI communication in the 2560 code, but it's used extensively on the new drop bear board for quite a lot of things actually. So yeah, it could certainly be used for that. Yep. Okay, but getting back to things here. Oh, and by all means, do fire off questions like that in the chat. I love seeing that. And if there's anything you want to see as well, by all means, mention that too. This one here, the secondary ignition map, is a big one that I really wanted to get in the last cycle, but unfortunately, just in the interest of getting it out the door and not making people wait forever, decided to decided not to bring in for last month or for last release. The reason I'm excited about this one and the reason that this is possible at all is because of the work that was done in consolidating the memory with calibration in last release. That freed up nearly a full kilobyte of memory, which again, if you're coming from a PC background, obviously doesn't sound like a lot, but makes a big difference on a small microcontroller like this, and allows things like the addition of a secondary ignition map. We've got the secondary fuel map already. That's been there for a little while, and I wanted the equivalent functionality for the ignition. And this pull request came in. I had a quick look at it. It adds most of it, not quite everything, but most of it. It's a complex addition in some ways, but simple in others. And this is a pretty cool little pull request. So I'm not sure. Dylan, I don't think I've ever spoken to you before. I don't remember catching up with you on Slack at all. Possibly you were going by a different username or something, so maybe I missed it. But a big thanks and a big hello to you if you're out there. So what we're doing here is we're adding another table, and we're expecting it to have basically be a copy of what we already have. Yep, we create Spark2 table, Spark2 map, yep. We need to do, we now have 3 copies of everything, believe it or not, around Advance, because we see, oh, Dave, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We now have 3 copies of everything, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive. You'd expect there to be 2, but you need to have 1 for each of the maps. So to say, okay, what's the advance being pulled from map 1? What's the advance being pulled from map 2? And what's the actual advance that's currently in use by the system? Now that might be if you've got a switch, so you're switching between map 1 and map 2, it will simply be equal to one of these 2 values, whichever one happens to be being used at the time. However, you might have a blended mode for, and I certainly hope to. I'm not sure if it's included in this pull request or not, but it's certainly something I intend to add. Where maybe these 2 values are multiplied by each other, or one is adding to the other, or something like that. In which case, the actual advance being used, and what we see on our, in this case, advance gauge, will not be equal to either of these 2 values. It will be a function of them. Might be an addition, it might be a multiplier, who knows. So that's why we need sort of 3 copies for everything now. Now I suspect we're going to have a couple of conflicts here, because the size of the live data block got expanded already. So if we have a look in, our INI, we're already at 114. So it must mean that something else went in into this live data stream between when this pull request came in and today. Which is probably right. We can have a look and we can see, yes, it was the fuel temperature correction, which went in quite late in the piece in the development cycle. Possible to add a delay to the fuel cut function. Yeah, we can certainly do that. I seem to recall some talk about that already. I can't remember whether there was a pull request or any changes made for it, but it's certainly something we can look at there, Daniel. Yeah, no question. Okay, so we know in this pull request we're going to have to make a couple of changes just to bring it up to date, and that's fine. That's to be expected. Let's do those changes. We'll pull it in and have a look. Like I said, the great thing about a new development cycle is we don't have to worry too much about stability for the moment, being right at the beginning of the whole process. We've got this. I never quite know why GitHub decides that these are too complex to do. It never seems right to me, because they always seem quite simple. But let's have a look. We'll push him up. No, it definitely doesn't want to let us do that. That's a bit of a pain. That's all right. I can do is have a look at some of these files because I can see where the changes are going to need to be. We already have, if we look at the page definitions here, where are they? Okay, so we can see that the first thing we're doing is adding a page on, and that should be okay. 14th page, yep. There we go. So this, I'm just switching over to the branch for this pull request now. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so we know that we're going to have to increase this. And we've got, yeah, okay, the advanced there. What do I want to do? Update from master. Okay, so we're saying we've got two conflicted files, which is to be expected. Let's open those up. Yeah, I'm not sure why live chat isn't working on the screen here. I don't know what's going on with that one today, guys. So my apologies there. YouTube chucked a bunch of errors when I went live with this stream. We'll get rid of that box for now. And I'm not sure exactly what happened. That's why I was asking at the start why, or whether anyone could see me, because I was a bit confused. So it's really odd there. So apologies for the chat not working there, guys. Do those files open? Let's try that again. Okay, here we go. Now I've got the conflicts in. Okay, so where are we? Okay, that's fine. We can see that there's been some additional gauges added, which we were just looking at, and they were overwritten by the fuel stuff that went in as well. So that's a nice, easy fix. Yeah, okay. Yep, we can just grab these 3 lines. So these are the versions that are in the pull request, and this is the version that's in master here. So we can just fix it up like that. Just align these a little bit nicer. Cool, very neat. And okay, and the addition here in the live output we need to change as well. So that's easy enough. We can just move these down below the fuel ones that got added. set the size of this to 116. Cool. So let's save that one, and I think that should be all. Yep, they should be the only two conflicts, I think. So no conflicts remaining, that's excellent. And in comms, we're going to have to make some changes there too, that's fine. Let's have a look at what they are. Okay, yeah, so this is the live data list. This is the full list of data that's sent from the ECU back to Tuner Studio. And in this case, the advanced ones that were added for this secondary fuel table were overwritten by the fuel temperature correction that was also added. So that's fine, we'll fix that up as well. And hopefully we'll be able to see the result of this in a minute. Now the other thing we're probably going to have to change is the actual size of this, because it won't have been expected that it's increased by 2. So that's okay. Let's increase those. I think that's probably everything we're going to need. So I've committed those changes now, which fix up all of those conflicts. But we're making these changes on to this specific branch, so we're not doing it on master branch at the moment. I'll bring this in and we'll merge it with the master branch in a moment. Publish that branch. Ah, I missed that file. I missed that change. Okay. Log size. I'm never quite sure if I've got the best workflow for this with GitHub. But it always seems to work when I have to make decent size changes to a pull request like that, and I end up creating a second branch for it. It always feels a little bit messy to me, so that there's probably a better way to do it. But for now, that's just the easiest way. Okay, so we can see that we've got a new branch here, PR435. We can compare it and create a pull request back to master. We can see that it's clean. It can be merged in with the changes that we made. PR branch 435. Now 435 was, oh, did I forget the number, did I? No, 435 should be right. 435, which is the pull request for this feature originally. We'll create that, we'll merge it. Closes 435. We can do this nifty thing with GitHub where we can write things like that on our commit requests, or on a commit, sorry. And they will actually impact the pull requests, and we can have a look at that in a minute. Cool. So that's all now merged in. If we have a look at 435, we can see that that's now closed automatically because it's all been pulled in and merged. If we jump back to our local copy, switch back to master. We'll pull all this in. I know this seems like a bit of a faff in the process, and it is a little bit, but we've now got all of these changes in that we wanted. So what does all that mean? It should mean that if we jump into Tuner Studio, if we load in the new development INI, we should see somewhere a secondary fuel table. Let's see what we get. Now it's probably going to have a bit of a fit because we haven't loaded the new firmware onto the board that it's connecting to for the moment, but that's all right, it'll just disconnect on us. Actually, let's just work offline, it's probably going to be easier. So we've now got a second spark table, look at that. In this case it's disabled now. We're going to have a look at this pull request and see what actually causes that to be disabled. Before we can use it. That's all right though. That's the main spark table. We've still got that. That hasn't been changed by the looks. Okay, so here we have the menu item for Spark Table 2. And we can see that, okay, interesting. It's been linked to the secondary fuel mode as well. So it only appears if the secondary fuel mode's on. That might be something I change, I think. That's not necessarily something I want to keep, because I don't think the secondary spark mode should be linked to the secondary fuel mode. Okay, we might just pull that off for now. Let me just catch up on chat for a minute. Again, apologies it's not appearing on screen for you guys today. The bounties for Speedy. If you open an issue, let's just have a look at any issue within Speeduino. Let's grab, say that one. Oh, that's interesting. There should be a button here for creating a bounty on it, and that's actually disappeared. That's really interesting. I'm not sure why that would have disappeared. I'll have a look at that as soon as the stream's over and figure out why. Yeah, there should be an option here to create a bounty. In the meantime, you can simply go to bountysource.com. And I think we should be able to just go to that URL if my memory serves. So a bounty, by the way, is if there's a feature that you really want to see, you can create a bounty for getting that done, and whoever completes that feature, I'm forgetting all my URLs here. If you want to see that feature, you can commit a certain amount of money to it, and that would then allow you to hopefully get a oh, apologies guys, my headphones just up and died. Yeah, but create a bounty for a certain feature that will then get paid out to whichever developer it is that actually implements that one. Yeah, the power regulation is done by the MC33814. Again, Dave, the circuit's been updated quite a bit though, and it's got a lot of improvements around it that weren't there in some of the earlier designs, just to make it a little bit more robust. Sorry I can't show you that bounty request feature. I'm surprised that that's disappeared, but I'll have a look into it. So I'll reload this IRA again. Oh, music's gone loud, has it? That'll be because my headphones died. Let me pull that back. Sorry guys, apologies about that. Obviously I didn't like my headphones turning off. Is that better? Please let me know if that music's still a bit too loud. Alright, so we've now got a secondary Spark table available to us. We can see that it's full of a whole heap of nothing. We'll need to give that some default values. But yeah, there we go. Okay, there we have a secondary advanced table. What we don't have is, if you look at the secondary fuel table, you can see it's got these settings up the top for when the secondary fuel table is actually used. So it's either switch conditions or, well, let's have a look. We can have it being switched based on a condition. So we'll use the secondary fuel table when map is greater than a certain value. You can change between different things there, or based on an input, so using a pin to switch between which fuel table is in use at the moment. So I personally want something like that for the secondary ignition table as well. It seems like that would make sense. Now, having a really quick look at this pull request, it appears that the way it's been set up is that it's very much linked to the secondary fuel table, which is a bit limiting in my opinion. So what we probably want to do is add some values there. So let's have a look at how this was created. We want to basically copy this for the secondary ignition map, in my opinion. I don't know if there's a valid use case for having a blended ignition mode. I'd have to have a bit of a head scratch and think about that one. Let's have a play though. Okay. What I'm basically going to do is copy all of these and duplicate them for the Spark 2 table. Maybe I'll copy the whole lot. Okay, so there isn't actually a dialogue set for this. Okay, that's cool. We need to create one then. Spark 2. We'll call it Spark Table 2 dialogue, just to match the what we've got here for the fuel. I'm just going to add another copy of these in. So where did that start? Here. So all I'm doing is duplicating all of these fuel items here and making another copy for Spark. Obviously all the items in them are going to need to be changed as well. So that'll be a little bit of work to do, but you can hopefully should be able to see that even just by doing that, did I get the right one? Yeah, okay. It still says fuel table because we need to change all that, but we've now actually got a full dialogue in here with all the switching options that we want. So we'll call it secondary spark table. Spark or ignition? What do people think? Maybe ignition's a better word. Ignition. Oh, actually, advanced, secondary advanced maybe is a better terminology. Okay. What did we call the first one? Call the first one spark table. Okay, let's keep the words the same. What we do need to do is copy all of these variables. So that should be relatively simple. We'll just find where they are. Yeah, so things for the second fuel table. I was obviously on the ball when I was thinking of that one. We can see that we need, what do we need? 4 bytes of memory, which is not too much. I'm thinking there must be some more variables somewhere. It doesn't seem like enough, but I could be wrong. So we just need to find a little patch of free memory that we can use up. And sure enough, we've got some at the end of this table, just enough. Now, I will need to change all these values over here. I'm fully aware of that. But for the moment, we'll just leave them the same. If anybody wants a more detailed explanation of the things I'm changing here in this INI file, I've run through it previously on a couple of streams, so I'm kind of just skipping over a little bit today. But if you want me to explain anything as I go, please just call it out. That down to just 2 free bytes in that particular table. So we're nearly out of space in this particular table. We've only got 2 bytes free, but that's all right. We got the amount of space that we needed for this particular bit of work. We'll define those bits in the globals file, so the ECU actually knows about them as well. So when I edit something in the INI file, this is telling Tuner Studio what they should be. When I edit in the globals here, this is telling the ECU about them. So you need to tell both Tuner Studio and the ECU how these things work. Obviously these byte counts are going to be wrong, but that's okay, we can update them later. And yeah, it's one of the classic development things of, oh, I'll just update it later. And 3 years later, somebody asks why the values in those bytes are completely off. All right. Change these ones to all be Spark now as well. wasn't quite right, I don't think. Oops. Yeah, that wasn't right. Sorry guys, I'm just concentrating a little bit while I do this. I just don't want to miss anything here. But hopefully I want to fire through this fairly quickly, and if I get it all right, and I think that's all, then it should allow us to have a look at it pretty quickly within Tuner Studio and hopefully see it actually there, which is where I wanted to get to. All right. Cool, so if we have a look at the secondary Spark table now, we see that we've got our big empty secondary table, which is what we expected to see. And now we've got all of these options here for when we can use the secondary advanced mode, which is pretty cool. Some of this will need to be written into the code. I did have a quick look at how this was being implemented. And it's very much reliant on the secondary fuel table. So I'll pull it out and make it its own separate thing. But yeah, we've now got a secondary fuel map, which is pretty cool. Obviously we need to set default values and things. But yeah, that's a nice new feature that we've got. I might just make a commit there, just to make it nice and clean. So we're just going to say separate, if I could type, second Spark table from fuel table. That'll do. Cool. I'll finish off a little bit of work on that later. Let's have another quick look through what pull requests are sitting out there. All right, let's have a look through the list. If there's anything you guys really want to see, if there's anything you think is a really cool feature, let's look at that one and we'll add it. Now I know there's actually a couple of guys out there who were the ones who actually created these pull requests, so no bias I'm sure there. But let's have a look. What would be cool? Now all of these I will look at, by the way. I'm just figuring out what's going to be the most interesting to have a look at right now. Oh, let's have a look. This will be a nice simple one. Add Weber Morelli pattern. So this is one that Vitor dropped in a little while back, and unfortunately I just did not get a chance to test before the last release went out. We've got some more conflicts as well. That's fine, but this one should be fairly simple. Trigger patterns are generally nice and separate. They're their own little chunk, so they tend to be fairly isolated from the rest of the code. Idle up output. I'll have to have a look at that one because there is already an idle up feature. I think that was fairly specific. Which one was that? We do already have the idle up setting, so if I turn idle on, we can do an idle up based on a pin input. Now the idea behind this is for something like air conditioning, so we can have a pin that is linked up to the air conditioning activation wire, so when you turn your air conditioning on you can turn the idle duty up as well. Pull request from Mitsubishi trigger decoder. I know there was a request for one. I don't think there's been a pull request for one. I haven't seen it, if it's come through. Where's the idle up one? Oh, add idle up output. Ah, yeah, this is one that James shot through. This is one just for, so when, I think, defining an output, yeah, if I'm reading that right, it would simply be an output pin that activates when this comes on, if I'm understanding that correctly. Yeah, okay. That's a pretty nifty one as well. I might leave it for now, James, but I will certainly get to it, and we'll have a look at it for the next release. Again, I know that everybody's probably disappointed that their pull request didn't make it in for the last release, but unfortunately I do have to draw a line somewhere. But that's why the new firmware cycle time is really exciting for me, because it's when a whole bunch of stuff gets dragged in. Okay, so this is using part of the dual wheel code, which is fine. One of the interesting things about the decoder setup that we've got is that a lot of patterns share very similar traits whilst not being exactly the same. So what you can do is actually have, for example, in this case, the setup routine for the dual wheel must also work for this Weber Morelli pattern. And you can even have, in some cases, where the actual interrupt handlers will work as well, but you might have to re-implement the primary handler, but you can keep the secondary interrupt handler, which saves on code a little bit. And see, here you go, the get RPM function is the same as the dual wheel get RPM function. Same for crank angle and everything. So that's pretty nifty, and that always helps. All right, let's have a look at the conflicts, and we'll pull this one in as well. Hopefully these should be fairly straightforward. Okay. Okay, so the difference here is that between when the pull request was made and now, there's been another pattern added as well. So the 420A pattern that was added. That's fine. We just need to update these values a little bit, and we'll just move him. Woo. We'll just move this one down to here. Now, one thing I really like when I pull in new patterns is to get a pattern written up on ArduStim pretty quickly. So as most of you are probably aware, I've been working on a new fork of ArduStim, which I've got running here in the background. I'm not sure if this pattern is included in there or not, but I'll certainly make sure that we've got something in there, because without a pattern like this, you can't test it and you can't verify that the decoder is actually working right. I'm going to do a fair bit of work, I think, over the next couple of weeks on a new version of ArduStim again, or the next release for this. There's a couple of different things I want to add. Currently, you can't save this configuration back to the stim board you're using. So every time the stim board boots up, it boots up with a default, whatever the default pattern on it was, which is really annoying. I want to be able to save the latest pattern and the latest RPM settings, so whether you're using the potentiometer to get the speed, or whether you've got a fixed RPM or anything like that. And currently that's something that you can't do, which annoys me no end. But it's getting there. It is getting there. I also I'm going to redo or add to this section here, this visualization section. So at the moment you can add, you can visualize what the wheels would look like. Oh, this poor little system's struggling a bit. Or you should be able to visualize what the wheels look like. I want to have an output view as well for what it should look like on a scope trace, just because I think that helps for verification as well. We'll get rid of him. All right, sorry, I jumped off on a tangent there. We'll get back to what we're looking at here. Um, oh, okay. The only change here has been a little comment, so that's fine. Everything else is the same on that one. Yeah, so there's obviously just a bunch of conflicts here with the 420A pattern that was added. So that's really easy to fix. Whoa, this is a big chunk of code though. Okay. Yeah, again, just a conflict with the 420A code that went in above it. I think we can actually just leave both of these, although they'll be out of order. Let's copy all of them. So is there anything you guys really want to see for this new release? Is there anything that's really excites you or you think would be a great addition? Just while I work through all of this. Yeah, that's right. Cool, so I've cleaned up all those conflicts there, and we can now commit that. We've got a nice clean pull request again. Dave, my man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The generosity of you guys is just incredible. It blows me away. Thank you so much. Cool, and there we go. We'll bring this in locally as well, and we'll make sure that this all appears as we'd expect. Oh, it's okay. That's an easy one. So I might run for another little bit, guys, and then wrap this up in maybe 5 minutes or so. Just because I sort of feel like I'm waffling a little bit now. Hopefully this has been an interesting insight into what's personally one of the most exciting times in a development cycle for myself, simply because it offers so many opportunities and so much freedom. If there's anything you want to see, if there's any questions you want to ask, by all means drop them in the chat now. What about a strategy pattern instead of a huge switch case? So one thing to keep in mind is that huge switch case that you saw is only part of the init function. So I'm guessing your concern here is around when you fire an interrupt, whether it has to run a huge big switch statement to figure out which pattern is in use, and that's not how it works. We have a big switch statement at the that we perform on initialization. Where are we? And as part of that initialization, we call the relevant setup routine, but then we define these pointers, so trigger handler and trigger secondary handler, which then get attached to the interrupt. So when the interrupt fires, it immediately fires the the function that we're using for whatever decoder pattern we happen to be using. So there's not a big switch statement that runs during the interrupt. It's all just configured with pointers on startup. Live stream sometime on CAN, that would be cool. I'm going to have to brush up on my own CAN skills, I think. It's something that I've played around with and have a little bit of familiarity. Everybody who's tinkered in this stuff for a little while, I think, has grabbed a CAN sniffer and plugged it into their daily driver or something and had a bit of a play around. But it's not something that I've played with explicitly an awful lot for Speeduino, I must admit. But it would be cool. I'll keep that in mind. Oh, can I quickly go over what this change in the dev cycle is? I seem to be out of the loop. Okay, that's cool, Ruben. So last night or this morning or whatever time it happened to be for yourselves, I made the new firmware release, the 2020-08, so the August firmware release, dropped. And the way the firmware development works is it goes in cycles. And we've just completed one cycle with that release that came out. And we can then move on to the next development cycle. So this cycle will probably be 2 or 3 months long in terms of the time between now and when the next release comes out. And what it means is that at the start of the cycle, I pull in a whole bunch of new features. I start a lot of the experimental work that I've been keeping in the back of my mind. And then probably 6 to 8 weeks from now, I stop doing all of that. I won't pull in any big new features that change things. I'll pull in smaller features still, but nothing major. And I'll spend the last 3 or 4 weeks of that cycle working through stability, making sure there's no bugs, making sure everything works as expected, doing the update routines so everything updates smoothly when people grab the new firmware. And then I'll make another release. But this is really day one of this new development cycle, given that the release dropped yesterday. So this is when a lot of the new functionality comes in, because it will get tested later in the cycle. So it's the last 4 or 5 weeks I've just been working on stability and getting things just right, but now I can move on to doing things that are a little bit more experimental. Did the miles per hour gauge make it in? Chase, it did make it in, so that will be there in the release that dropped yesterday. Obligatory Speeduino update. Yeah, I got nothing on the Speeduino front at this stage. One thing with the development cycles, actually, this is another good point, is I normally I do a bunch of pull requests and things at the start of the cycle, and then I step away for a little bit, and I might go and work on hardware for a little while, or I might go and work on Arduino or something else for a couple of weeks, just to get my head in a different space and away from the firmware for a little while. So maybe this time round I might use it to do some updates on Speeduino, and I can do a live stream on that if you guys are interested as well. Audi R8, man. If somebody wants to give me their R8 to test Speeduino on, I'll happily commit to the cause. That's fine. All right. So with all of that pulled in, that did pull in fine, did it? Yep. We should be able to see that we've now got this pattern loaded. For some reason, Tuner Studio puts all of the dialogues that pops up on my secondary screen, which is a little bit frustrating. Oh, we don't want that one. No, we do want that one. Oh. So we should see now that we've got this Weber Morelli pattern after the 421, which is where we popped it in the list. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's probably fairly small for you. But it is now in the list and hopefully should be working. Vitor will probably be able to say more than I whether that works smooth enough, but hopefully it does. I'll test it with an Arduino pattern fairly soon and see if I have any luck with it. But that's really how things get pulled in. And I'll be doing a lot of that over the next few days or so, just to get a lot of those outstanding pull requests in. Otherwise, guys, I think I'm probably going to wrap it up there for today. I've been running for pretty much bang on an hour, which is where I wanted to aim for today. I got a few other things I got to get onto today with some testing, but hopefully that's been entertaining. If you like these streams, I'm more than happy to keep them up. It's a really nice time for me to just sit down and do some coding, and hopefully if other people are enjoying them, then I'll keep them up. There's been a few requests to do some basic tutorial type videos, so with the addition of the fuel and oil pressure that went in last month, one person has said, well, you know, your streams are great and all, but it's not really what a lot of us are interested in terms of development. We just want to know how to hook up our fuel or oil pressure sensors, and that's totally fair. So I might work on over the next week. I'll grab a pressure transducer and muck around with that and do a video for those sorts of basic things. But if there's anything else you guys want to see in terms of a stream video or a pre-recorded video, please just let me know, because I'm always interested in what you guys want to see. All right, crew. Hopefully you all had a good time. I'm off to have another coffee for a Sunday morning. But wherever you are, have a good afternoon, a good morning, a good day, a good evening. And I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, guys.